Welcome, Todd and William Ramsey, our guests this evening for another amazing California. And William, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me back. Just trying
Great.
to write down some of my notes from the books.
Okay. And Todd, you
I
doing
am
good
so
tonight?
happy to be here. Thank you
Okay.
so much for having me. And before anybody forgets, if this ends up on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe if you like what you hear. And go to the Walter Bosley channel for more amazing content, merch, and so much more. Become a member today.
That's right. That's right. Listen to Todd. He knows what he's talking about. He won't steer you wrong. So
That's right.
tonight's subject is really, really fascinating. And I'm going to admit up front, I have never read Catcher in the Rye. I was telling you guys this earlier. And I'm kind of glad I haven't, because now, with all the various things we're going to talk about tonight, the things I've learned and the things I know I'm going to learn this evening, I think it's going to make it a much more interesting and textured read. So, Todd, take her away. Where are we
Well,
going
tonight's
tonight?
subject on Catcher in the Rye, interestingly enough, written by J.D. Salinger, the only book published by the author in the July of 1951. It has sold over 19 million copies since its release, and it's probably one of the more challenged books, perhaps the most challenged from 1961 to 1982. It was on the New York's bestseller list, but never reached with higher than four. Um, I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's a very in-depth and psychologically challenged book, and I am so proud and honored to have William back with us to discuss the book. William,
Yeah,
whenever you're ready, my friend.
I'm just trying to get these notes out, but it is an incredible book. I read it in high school. I think everybody that's mandated reading. I don't know anybody who didn't have the book. I thought it was like a classic in American literature, supposedly a coming of age story. But rereading again after all I know changes the whole thing, especially with the stuff in the slides and so many things then kind of parapolitics where the book is. And so it's pretty incredible. Like Salinger's Intel background, and how did this book become very well received? And is Holden Caulfield the main character? Is he a hero or an anti-hero? I think that's the question, because I think in the common kind of culture, he's seen as this kind of like lost rebel. But my rereading of the book gave me a completely different take on him. Like a very
It gave me a different take on the character too. I don't think as you grow old, when you're young, your perception and you read the book, your perceptions of a character like Holden Caulfield is, yeah, you kind of want to be like him. But as you
right.
grow up and start maturing and you have to be in the world and go through tough times and you deal with adults, um, your perceptions change
Yeah,
a great deal. And
yeah,
I think that's sort of the truth of the matter.
Well, and now that we see what and whom this book seems to be repeatedly connected to, I mean, who it's like, oh nope, don't want to be Holden Caulfield, because is that connection, that identification, is that what is part of sending these particular guys we're going to discuss tonight over the edge?
Mm.
right. A good
That,
call.
that's a that's a really interesting question, William. I'd love to know your opinion on it. Could MK Ultra Trigger be any piece of literature or art, or is there just something special about the Catcher in the Rye that makes it such an effective trigger?
I think that, like what you mentioned, there's all the psychological elements going on in this book. I think it's rich. It shows a lot of rich psychological states that aren't overtly mentioned. So he dissociates. Holden Caulfield does. He says he's in a trance in page 73. So these words, like, very strange. And even the narrative, if you look at the narrative, it's not like a third party looking down. You're in his mind as
Hmm.
he's relating to the world. And but it's very strange how he perceives the world. When you, like, as an adult, as I read this book, his perception of the world is off. Like, he
Hmm.
thinks that everybody's out to get him, or he makes these weird statements like people are always ruining things for you when they're not doing it. And somebody's telling him he's shouting at somebody and they're saying, stop shouting. And he's not, in his mind, he's not shouting. So it's very interesting. There's little subtle things all throughout the book. So
Yeah.
I think for your trigger, there's something also weird. He has a red hat that he calls a people shooting hat. And he shoots people with this hat and he puts it on and off all throughout the book. So it's almost like he's changing his own character in a subtle way through the book. So he'll be walking in the cold, and it's very strange. They'll overlap with Chapman and Central Park and the Dakota. Like he's walking in these same areas in this book, which you can't even make up. Like it is so, the correlation is so eerie. But so to try to answer your question, there's a lot going on in this book, a lot of repetitive stuff that people hear about the MK Ultra, the mind control, and it starts very early. He repeats over and over, you will, you will, you will, on page 19. And you hear that he is in the care of a doctor and has been psychoanalyzed from the age of 13, which is very curious. Then he has this run-in at a bar. I mean, I'm ruining the book for people, but he runs into a bar later at about page 200 with this guy, Luce, and he's been psychoanalyzed, but he asked Luce, did psychoanalysis work for you? So he's already been psychoanalyzed. Does it work? So he doesn't even know whether this kind of psychological state, and a lot of the stuff is passed, like, and when I was reading this, I mean, maybe my memory's not as great, but I don't remember these aspects taught in the book. And I remember him taught as kind of an anti-hero. And I saw him as kind of like almost an American Psycho or an Alex DeLarge type character from Clockwork Orange, which I've seen the movie and read the book. So you kind of almost see that. And there's also these kind of elements of transformation. He's transforming, like the author makes a note of his transformation, that he's changing and growing and skinny and smokes a lot. And he's a psychological mess, really. He has insomnia. He can't sleep. So this is kind of a common theme of a lot of these guys who've been tampered with. Like they're out of whack. Like their equilibrium is gone, like Chapman himself. And just his worldview is hate. I hate the world. I hate the world. It's not positive. And we don't get the full story, but he's been kicked out of like multiple privileged boarding school. So he's at a boarding school. He's about to get kicked out of it again and comes back to New York City without telling his parents. So that's kind of like the journey. It's not like the journey of a hero that, triumphs at school and wins the debating, club head chair and is a triumphant athlete. This guy is not athletic. He's not involved in athletics. He's kind of like a pest. He like has these people that he hangs around with, but he doesn't like. He always says he doesn't like them. So there's that common theme. Like he doesn't seem to have like a close friend. His real kind of person that he puts on his pedestal is his 10-year-old sister, Phoebe, right? So that's this is kind of a strange kind of ideal. And there are hints of, there's a lot of subtle, like this is obviously written in a 50s fashion, but there's a lot of subtle hints to kind of non-standard sexual practices. So like there seems to be a hint of him, like when I read it, him sitting on the bed of his schoolmaster, which is weird. Like you should not be in that kind of environment with your schoolmaster where they're sleeping. So I thought that was kind of a hint at something weird. But there's also things all through this book. There's references to sadism, voyeurism, transvestitism, homosexuality. So it's a common theme. So that's also kind of a weird thing, which maybe those topics, well, I mean, Lady Chatterley's Lover was only like 30 years before this, which like it's obviously super tame for our thing, but these were like very sensitive topics back in the day. But these are all the way through this whole thing, it goes all the way through. So this is, and also another weird theme that I've seen in cults that was in Catcher in the Rye is this kind of idea of life as a game. And you see this weird kind of game theme, even all the way up to this weird thing that a lot of the intellectuals are involved, which is game B, like as we're going to move on to a new kind of society. But it also was part of like the Finders. I don't know if you guys are aware of the Finders cult or John Brisson's research, but he was like a game, like life is a game. We're playing a game. So it's kind of like a detachment from reality if you think your real life decisions are actually a game and not something with consequences and things like that.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I can go, there's all kinds of issues in this that go on. He says he has a brain tumor.
Yeah.
Once a rat, always a rat. When you see this over and over, it's like putting in your brain, the outside world is tainted, full of phonies and morons. And imagine just reading this book over and over, like it has to have an effect on your, like I'm reading it once again and it's having an effect on my psyche, you know?
Right.
So there's a lot going on in this. He says he's a sex maniac in his mind, but he's interested in sex, but he cannot complete it. He cannot complete the sexual act, which is another kind of weird thing. Like he's sexually frustrated. He's obsessed with sex. It's almost like that Monty Python skit where he's asking everybody else about their sex life, but he can't do it. And he actually has an opportunity. There's a prostitute in his hotel room. He's rich, so he has tons of money, but he panics and doesn't engage in, that kind of behavior. So that's a kind of another odd thing. He uses fake names. He says he can lie all the time. He's on a train with like the mother of one of his classmates, and he gives a fake name and talks her up. And he says like, I can lie for hours, So he's like almost like a sociopath or something wrong. Like this is not a positive character to me. Fascinated and scared by blood. So like there's weird themes.
It sounds a little also like J.D. Salinger could have based Holden on a composite of all the elite Ivy League boys who made up the OSS.
Right. There's something going on there. That's a good point, because there's a lot of mentions of Ivy League and other schools and Princeton. Like somebody's going to Princeton, somebody's going to Columbia. Right. So I think maybe that was the ideal at the time, is like these, like when you go off to college. So I think that there's something there. Like there's something about this OSS. Maybe that's Salinger saying, I'm not part of this club. And that's why I'm writing this book, or I'm fronting this book, is like,
right. Well, as you're aware, after J.D. Salinger's first tour of duty, William, he checked himself into a mental hospital, and at the end of at the end of Catcher in the Rye, it's very anticlimactic, but it's highly believed that Holden is in a mental hospital at the end.
Wow, that makes sense.
The question is, what happened to Salinger when he was in the mental hospital? Because as soon as he got out, he re-enlisted to denazify Germany.
Right. Like he was in France, like finding Nazis and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the other interesting themes is it's anti-Christian too. So
yes,
he's an atheist. He also makes fun of Jesus. He uses terms like they wouldn't even say, which would be blasphemous, I think, back then, like for CHRISD sakes and all this stuff. So like, stop swearing. The girl's telling him, stop using these things. There's like things where he says he has more, he's anti-Christian. He has more sympathy for, I don't know if you remember the Legion part of the New Testament. He has more, he says all of the apostles are flunkies, and that he has more sympathy for the lunatic who is out there, and like Judas did not go to hell for betraying Christ. So he's telling people like, do you think Judas went to hell? No, I don't. So like, it's a sinister aspect to me, this thing.
I wonder if that's where the Stones got the title of their album inspired from, Sympathy for the Devil.
No, but
from what I heard, that was the Process Church. Process inspired Sympathy from the Devil, according to Dave McGowan, but I don't know.
Okay.
But it's just one of those elements that comes out. It's this theme of insanity and craziness. He calls himself, I am a madman. Like, I can do this stuff. I'm a madman. He repeats that at the end of chapters. So it comes out, this madman theme. If I had like a digital copy, I bet I would find him talking about himself as a madman 20 or 30 times.
It sounded like the book is filled with like crazy psychopathic acclamations. Yeah. I would call it, I think it's almost like he's psyching himself up to do something. He has to reject like there's one psyche that he has, and he has to reinforce this like artificial psychopathic, sociopathic worldview by reminding himself, but by giving him these acclamations. I'm a madman, right? I don't know how you would feel about that,
I think
but
you're right. I think you're
you know,
right. And it's kind of disturbing because you're in his brain saying it. So it's like
mhm,
it's a very close relationship. You're not watching or reading something from a third party stating something. So you're in
mhm.
somebody's head. So it's like in closer in my impression of like reading, it's closer to your own psyche because he's saying it all the time. So you're literally in the brainscape of somebody like that. And there's like one sequence where he gets beat up, he starts crying. So he's trying to act like a tough guy, but he starts crying. He says, I'm crazy. And then he said, I would just jump out of this thing. So he's suicidal too. So
Mhm.
like the guy
Well,
has almost like the worst, like all these really troubling
right.
traits.
Yeah, here's the thing. Here's the thing I think is really interesting. Like we're definitely dealing with mental illness
Yeah.
on a very high level. Now, I didn't mean for this to happen, but of course, I listened to the audiobook, and I was going on an errand with Scott, my buddy Scott, and we were listening to Elliott Smith, and that song "Needle in the Hay" came on. And I swear, William, that the stuff that Elliott was singing about matches Holden Caulfield's personality
Wow.
to a T.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah,
Wouldn't be surprised at all.
yeah.
And it kind of going back to kind of a theme that Walter talked about was this kind of Eastern elite thing. He's rich. So his dad's a corporate lawyer. He has money. And he really can he's almost like American Psycho where he can sense certain things that are cheap. So he gets upset and depressed at people's cheap suitcases and it
Hmm.
depresses him and bourgeois pens. So certain pens are too middle class for him.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
mean,
made
that's
me
a
think.
clear sign of psychopathy, William. That he cares about aesthetics.
Yeah.
Aesthetics are more important to him than like someone's personality, right? Or who they actually are to get to
Right.
know
So the
somebody.
superficial elements and nice clothes. And he talks about Brooks, like Brooks Brothers. So
Yeah.
like he's familiar with these kind of high class kind of things, more elite Eastern stuff. But yeah, just the madman stuff is just crazy. Oh, and he also is kind of like he always talks about other people having to be a big shot or a celebrity. So like he doesn't feel that way. But if you're a big shot and celebrity, you get things in life. And I think that was another one. He's also a pyromaniac. So in addition to being an insomniac, into self-harm, saying he's a liar, brain tumor, lonesome, depressed, he likes to take matches and let them light and go down to where his fingers put him out. And he does that
I,
over and over again.
I imagine there's an implication that is he a bedwetter and an excessive masturbator as well? I mean, because the pyromania, that kind of, sometimes, some decades back could be a euphemism for one or the other.
It's not hinted at or stated, so I didn't see
Yeah.
that. But it is, I mean, I just don't see him as like a heroic figure or an anti-hero,
He's not.
really.
He's not. He's basically a
He's a
villain.
jerk. Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
villain.
he is the villain. That's why there's no good way to end that book. That's why it's so anticlimactic at the end.
In a way, but from a psychological state, Todd, it's very even more disturbing because he says something at the end. He goes, I don't recall actually factually remembering all the stuff I just talked about. So it's
Oh,
almost like he
yeah.
was in the so I can get the book. I'll read it to you. The
Yeah, yeah, no,
last
I
chapter.
remember exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
I just stepped on my cat. Sorry.
So he's got dissociative issues then. This
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now
I remember
what
exactly
year
what
was
Liam's
it
talking about.
published?
Yeah.
In the 50s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this book came out in I think it was July of 51.
51. And isn't it interesting? Look at the generation that it influenced and what happened during, the next the rest of that decade building up and then through the 60s. By the end of the 60s, and the rise of the anti-hero in Hollywood, which was late 60s, really took root during the 70s.
Right.
And we've been stuck
Right.
with
Well,
the adulation of the anti-hero since then. And I think that's been bad for our society. The anti-hero smartass has become the hero, and the virtuous hero has become the joke.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, listen. Yeah, he's a trickster too. That's interesting too that you say like the joke thing. He's a total trickster. He gets off on like saying fake names and telling fake stories to people. This is the way the book ends. DB's his brother. He says, DB asked me what I thought about all the stuff I just finished telling you about. I didn't know what the hell to say. If you want to know the truth, I don't know what I think about it. I'm sorry I told so many people about it. About all I know is I sort of miss everybody I told about. That's it. So he doesn't know what he thinks about all that stuff he did. So it's like it's not sinking into him.
Yeah. Well,
That's the last paragraph.
Right. So, like, that's the thing with the people who suffer from sociopathy or psychopathy is they don't really think about consequences. Like, they don't feel anything for any consequence at all. That they'll get upset when they get caught because it's an ego thing. But yeah, I mean, this guy is definitely a serial killer in the making, in my opinion.
Yeah, so it's almost that bad. Like that's my take. And then it kind of elicits the question, guys, why is this book promoted so much? Why? Like this isn't a heroic book. It's not a, I don't know, 19th century drama or like a adventure story or something.
Well,
Like the
I hate
Last
to say it.
Mohican. Like why is this out there?
I really think, based on the that documentary I saw about Salinger, and it really got into his military intelligence, and probably even if it's on the edge, somehow connected to the MK Ultra stuff going on. This book might have even have been an assignment, and therefore that's why it's pushed, because we're in that post World War II era when the CIA and the military industrial complex, as we all know, were doing nefarious things all in the name of Cold War national security and being a good soldier. I don't know. It to me, his military background is highly suggestive of
something
of
more
that.
going on.
Yeah.
Something weird. And the fact that he didn't follow up with like another important book too is odd. Like,
yeah, and his like supposedly he had short stories with Holden Caulfield and stuff like that, and his son was going to release those in 2020, but it never happened. Whether these things really existed or not, and whether it's all made up or maybe he really had them, I don't know, but supposedly he was supposed to release them. The interesting thing with Salinger, though, is I'm sure you guys are both aware that he actually had 6 chapters of Catcher in the Rye during D-Day, when he landed on D-Day.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he was writing it in a combat zone.
Right, so that's 44, right? June 44?
Yeah. Yeah. And then let's see, he got out, and I think he is around he was denazifying in 46.
Well, I
So,
wonder if you compare those first 6 chapters that he wrote to how the book turned out and the rest of the book. I wonder if you could see a point where, in this hypothesis that it had to do with MK Ultra backing and an assignment. I'm wondering if there's a point in the book where you could see the point at which he became involved in that and it influenced the writing of the rest of the novel, or maybe the hypothesis is wrong and he really just had this in his head.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. But to what William was saying about the Eastern elites, J.D. Salinger himself technically was an Eastern elite. He was born in 1919 in upstate New York, and his father was very well off. He sold like distribution of like ham, and I forgot the other product. But he had money. J.D. Salinger was not poor by any stretch of the imagination.
Mm.
So that was the world he was sort of living in. He went to Columbia University and it just didn't work out for him there. Um, so,
What
I
did he
mean, yeah,
study?
what's that?
What did he study while there?
I don't know. I just got this from the documentary. It didn't
Okay.
go into depth.
Maybe he
It's
didn't get
probably
beyond the
literature.
GE, the general ed.
Yeah.
One of the other interesting things is he kind of had a strange life. Like he was a shut-in, right? Like people couldn't
Oh, yeah.
interview him, and
Oh, yeah. He was
Yeah.
a recluse.
yeah, recluse, and like there was some kind of thing about women that he had. Like women would
Mhm.
come and go. Like there was some kind of
Yeah.
story I vaguely remember. But yeah, so his kind of life, like he didn't. He was kind of like one of almost, I don't know what it's like. Maybe the guys who faked the moon landing, they didn't revel in their triumph, their literary triumph. Like I would like if somebody kind of like Shakespeare, like we don't know who Shakespeare was because it wasn't one dude. But like, why isn't he going out on book tours or getting literary awards and being in public and really reveling in his achievements? Like that to me is kind of a tell. Just like you
Right.
said, Walter, like something else is going on here.
Well,
And at
let
that
me let
time,
me
like
throw.
this is pre MK Ultra. MK Ultra is 1953. So you've got Bluebird, you've got
Yeah.
Artichoke. You still
Yeah.
have the engines of the government are spinning. The wheels are spinning before it ramped up.
Yeah.
Well,
One of the
our psychiatrists knew the German psychiatrists in the years leading up to the war. So they were kind of already aware to some extent that this kind of mind science was going on. And then, of course, once we got a bunch of psychiatrists and pharmaceutical experts, through Operation Paperclip, then we were off to the races with this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And just another thing, like he says, like this is another kind of blasphemous statement by Holden Caulfield, page 174. I swear to God, I'm a madman.
Hmm.
Like that's like a very powerful statement. Like you're not saying to somebody else, you're swearing to God you're a madman. And another statement, Jesus would have puked. And then he goes to the wicker bar. I mean, I don't know how much you want to stretch it, but the wicker is really associated with like the Wicker Man. Like this is kind
Yeah.
of could be a
I
dark
actually,
association.
interestingly enough, I just watched a documentary on the Druids and some of their forms of human sacrifice, and the Celts and stuff like that. They would do that. They would put the sacrifice into a wicker structure and burn it, and the man would usually a prisoner of war would burn alive, basically. So that's a really interesting insight, William. I didn't pick up on that.
But there's little hints here and there. Like his buddy's name is Luce too, like
Hmm.
William Luce, the head of Time Life, like super influential, almost in every secret society imaginable, Skull and Bones, Pilgrims, all that stuff. So one guy's name is Luce, which is interesting. So I kind of picked up on that. And there were also kind of hints that made me think of kind of the Kinsey kind of cultural change where Luce is a very knowledgeable guy about sex and he knows all about sex. So there's this kind of sexual element here. And Luce is making all these statements that I don't think are accurate. Half of married guys are gay. So that idea that like there's everybody's non-linear sexual or something is here, and Kinsey report, which is totally debunked. Like the Kinsey report's fake as hell, just
Yeah.
shoddiest science ever.
Yeah.
But just that these kind of statements in there were interesting. That's it. Like they're trying to promote that idea that dudes are gay on the side, which is not. It's not really true. The amount of gay people isn't even that much. It's probably like 5-10% of the population, if that.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see all that when you start like parsing through the narrative and really analyzing. You're like, wow, transvestite him. He watches a guy in a hotel who puts on women's clothes, so he's watching it. I mean, it's
So
weird.
there's voyeurism right there.
Yeah.
And think about it. His friend's name, Luce, is that short for Lucis or Lucius, or
Well,
which
maybe.
comes from illumination, right? Light, Lucifer. And here's a little side synchronicity. The Mercedes McCambridge played the character of the sister in the film Giant. She plays Luz, which is the feminine version, I think, right, of that name, the male name Luz.
Wow.
I could be wrong, but then she goes on to be the voice of the demon Pazuzu in The Exorcist.
Oh, wow.
You know, so
get this. The character Luce comes down from Columbia to visit him at the bar. So Columbia is the bringer of light, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So there may be, I mean, these are things that they're putting into the narrative. It's very sophisticated. This is not a rookie book by somebody who's, I mean, there's somebody who's like 24 and just writes the great American novel. Something's going on here. Something very profound. Like, he's smart as hell. When did Salinger supposedly write this? How old was he? He was born in 1919. So this was supposedly published by a 32-year-old man. Possible, but still, like, he knows the psychological states and stuff like that. Like,
right. He actually, he shopped the novel around. It was a the name of the publishing company. Do you remember the name? Little something Little and
Little
Company?
Brown?
Little Brown and Company. Yeah, that's it.
Now, why is the cover, it seems like invariably always the Mao little red book thing, the red with the yellow lettering? Why does it seem like they've kept that tradition of that edition?
Do you know, Todd?
I don't know. I think
it's the story of Phoebe, who likes to go on the what is it? The circle around the horse.
The carousel.
The carousel.
Carousel.
Yeah. It's the carousel to grab the ring. So it's kind of his obsession with his 10-year-old sister. It's subtly symbolized by that cover. So.
And don't forget about Holden's fantasy, his dream where he's in the rye and he's catching the kids, and he's the protector of these children's innocence. And but he just misheard. It's like based off another poem by David Burns, I think. Is that right, William?
I don't remember that part. I know that he hears this kid singing the song from the title when he's walking through New York. So, like, he's walking through New York and he hears him sing. What is it?
Were you thinking of the Scottish poet Robert Burns, Todd?
Robert Burns, yes.
Yeah. If a body catch a body coming through the rye.
That's it. Yep.
So anyway, so I think that's why that's the carousel theme is always on there.
It's Robert. Some editions that's there too. Yeah.
Robert Burns' poem "Coming Through the Rye."
Yeah. I thought that's interesting because it's basically the male power fantasy where he's the hero and he's rescuing all these kids. But at the same time, it's deeper because it's like his innocence. He knows he doesn't have any innocence left. So he's trying to save all these kids' innocence. And by saving these kids' innocence, he thinks he can save his own innocence, and it's just,
Is there some subtle subterfuge, subtextual irony there? Could he possibly actually be doing these children harm? And this idea that he's the protector is him trying to compensate. Does it hint at all?
Yeah, it's exactly what it is, Walter. He's just compensating. Yeah.
Wow. It just, I guess I'm a different kind of person, but to think of anybody in, younger folks in the younger generation back then, embracing this character as any kind of even an anti-hero, because he just sounds like, every cynical asshole you met in college and high school.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's correct. I think, like, even kind of worse than cynical. There's an episode where he flies off the handle and tries to get his roommate in a headlock. Like, he actually physically assaults somebody to the point of like trying to like choke him out.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's violent too. He throws off the handle. He broke every window at his house or something after his brother died. So that's how he got kicked out of the last like school. So like this guy's like a repeat troublemaker. It's just like there's nothing going on. Like
so for all the decades that this book has been around, okay, and so much talking about it, and particularly now the scrutiny because the connection with the clearly the MK Ultra associated assassins and stuff. Why hasn't this film been made into a movie? We know that Salinger, while he was alive, was a recluse, and he probably just refused to sell the rights, but he's been dead now for a while. And I'm wondering if there's something in his will that said never. You know, I find it interesting that no one's made this into a film.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, they've tried to do like copycats, like take the basic concept of Catcher in the Rye and do their own thing. Like the film Igby Goes Down with Kieran Culkin is basically a ripoff of Catcher in the Rye.
Okay.
Yeah, they changed it up a bit, but that's basically what it is.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, there's been other films influenced by it.
Sure.
I guess Donnie Darko was close to Catcher in the Rye.
Hmm.
Where
Yeah.
it's like a troubled teenager, kind
Yeah.
of complex emotions. Apparently, people have made correlations between that.
But
There
more
was
so
another,
real.
yeah, kind of like a version.
Yeah.
There was The Good Girl, which is a more recent one where the main character, Jake Gyllenhaal, is totally obsessed with Holden Caulfield. So there's kind of some modern ones, but yeah, like you said, there's no.
That's interesting because Gyllenhaal's the star of Donnie Darko too. So
Yeah, it's weird. So
wonder if
there's
that
kind
was
of
on
a
purpose.
yeah. So there's actually a sequence, I think, in The Good Girl of Gyllenhaal reading Catcher in the Rye.
All
So
right.
those are some of the more recent
Okay.
ones.
Maybe we should get into the first assassination. That would be John
Yeah.
Lennon.
Let's do it. Let's
Okay.
pull up the slides. Let's see.
Yeah.
If I can find them. Where did you put them? They're on my screen. Okay. So I did a show for my podcast back in April of 2024, and it was just a kind of a research because people had stated that Catcher in the Rye wasn't involved in a bunch of stuff, but I kind of proved that Chapman was heavily involved in Catcher in the Rye based upon other people's research. And I think that he was an MK Ultra subject for sure.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because it kind of ties into current events today because he was a strange character. He moved around a lot. He seemed to suddenly have enough money to transfer to New York City. There's a movie actually about him by it's called what's the name of it? Who's the actor? Who's the guy who bought Lookout Mountain?
Jared Leto.
Jared Leto is the main character in that movie. I'd see if I can find that. But
Jared Leto has his own cult.
he sure does. He likes the smiley face. He knows all about Typhonian magic too. But that's another That's another show. But anyway, this guy's very similar. He was at a hospital on the kind of eastern shore of Oahu, and one of the guys who tried to kill Trump in 2024, not the first guy, Crooks, which I think he's actually a cutout, but the next guy, his name is he was actually from that same part of Hawaii, who had like weird travels too, was able to travel to Ukraine and able to travel to Miami and supposedly take a shot at Trump. But anyway, so the Lennon thing, this guy's carrying the book around, and it was also linked to this Catcher in the Rye for people. We were talking in the pre-show, Rebecca Schaeffer, for people who may not remember that story. She was supposedly murdered. She was murdered by a random guy who was obsessed with Catcher in the Rye.
Right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Did I believe Mark David Chapman bought a fresh copy of Catcher in the Rye?
I think so. I think he was seen by somebody else walking around. Yeah, and I mean Chapman had all the elements too, because even after he was arrested, he was visited by like 5 different, doctors or something, MK Ultra doctors. 2018. Robert John Bardo was his name, a young guy, 19 at the time. But yeah, he stalked Rebecca Schaeffer for years. Totally, yeah, very disturbing. Anyway, so Catcher in the Rye. These are the kind of things that other ties in. I mean, we can do more about Chapman. The Chapman stuff is all from a book, The Murder of John Lennon. There's actually a couple good books. I've interviewed this guy, David Whelan, about Lennon, but this one is Fenton Bresler. And just goes into detail. Like he just mentions all the stuff. He actually mentions Candy Jones as a known MK Ultra, and also Kittinger. Yeah, it's all in this book. It's incredible.
We know about Candy Jones, don't we, William?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Now I think we had this conversation. I think a couple weeks ago or something like that. But the whole MK Ultra thing seemed to be Hawaii seemed to be sort of a focal point.
Yeah.
Of the MK Ultra stuff, right? Because we were talking about Herb Mullen, and that was a hospital in Maui, and I think we were talking about that shooter from 1981, Lawrence Kwong.
Yeah, you found out about that. I didn't even know who Lawrence Kwong was.
Yeah. But also, he was in the hospital in Hawaii as well.
Wow, amazing. Like Chapman supposedly, quote, worked at a hospital as a janitor in Hawaii. Like that was kind of, his background was so strange. 24, same age as Sirhan. Just
That's
strange
interesting.
worldview. We worked for this weird kind of cutout, CIA cutout called like Worldview Christian Church or something.
Yeah.
Was going around.
Was that a Jesuit church?
I don't know. I need to know
that's interesting because Arthur Bruner also worked as a janitor in a Jesuit school.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of Brian Wesley Ruth is the guy I'm trying to remember his name. That was the guy who was on the north coast of Oahu, just like Chapman. But this book is really interesting. They mentioned James Earl Ray, so they've got all these guys. They're all kind of the same lone nuts. They were characterized as lone nuts, but this is they go in. This book goes in the build up to the murder of Lennon, and this is kind of interesting. It goes. Let's see. Steve Spiro, the New York policeman who arrested Mark, had given me a list of the objects that Mark had on him when he took him into police custody. It includes Mark's copy of The Catcher in the Rye, the key to his New York hotel room, and his Bank of Hawaii Visa card. So that's kind of one thing. But let's see. The second most popular misconception about Mark relates to J.D. Salinger's famous novel, The Catcher in the Rye. The theory is he had always identified himself with Holden Caulfield, the book's phony-hating 16-year-old hero, ever since he first read Catcher. After all this was amazing, he said, the reason I killed John Lennon was to gain prominence to promote the reading of J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye. I'm not saying I'm a messiah or anything like that. If you read the book and if you understand my past, you'll see that I'm indeed the Catcher in the Rye of this generation.
Mm-hmm.
So
I find that to be really interesting. Like, it's interesting that he's kind of compares himself to Holden Caulfield in a way, considering that even though Holden has a bunch of mental illness issues, he's only 16. His brain is still developing compared to Mark here, who's old enough and his brain has stopped growing. So it kind of makes you wonder why he identifies as a child, like with a child, basically.
Well, look where we're at today with, of course, you don't want to make anybody with mental health issues feel ostracized or anything like that. But we live in a time where, particularly the younger generations, they wear mental health issues almost like a badge of honor. They're very, almost
they share their anxiety and their depression and all that stuff. It's very different.
Yeah. And if that keeps them from harming themselves, hey, that's great. But it's almost where is the line where it becomes unhealthy to be so flag waving about these kinds of things. Now, is Holden Caulfield in the book? Is he I don't want to say proud of his issues, but is he, is he kind of like, as crazy as I am, just accept them because that's just the way it is? Or I'm not expressing this very,
but it's almost like he doesn't even has the kind of self-reflection to analyze what's going on.
Okay.
Right. He just acts just like I said at the end of the book, that end of the book statement. Like, I know I told you, I didn't realize this, like he's not self-aware. Like, he's almost dissociative. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, it's almost like he's working on instinct. Almost sometimes, just in certain parts of the book, you know. Um, I agree with you 100%, William. But yeah, it's like he kind of wears them like clothes, almost. You know, like
Yeah.
it's become his identity. Is that? Would you agree? Would you agree with that, William?
What becomes his identity?
Like when he says he's a madman and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Things that
think
he's
so.
told himself over and over again. It's become his like identity, right? He's
Right.
unaware of like the deeper aspects of it. But him as like holding Caulfield in his head, that is his identity, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's crazy like how much Chapman identified with this book.
Hmm.
It's just off. I mean, and they mentioned this trigger in this countdown to murder, like it's all there.
Yeah. Now it's I understand Dr. Narut, MK Ultra scientist. He also had a history in Hawaii. Is there any connection to Dr. Narut and any of the three assassins that we're going to be speaking about tonight?
No, not to my knowledge, but he was notorious for like making the statement. I think he was ONI, right? Naval Intelligence,
Yes, he
but
was.
making the statement that they had suites of like mind control assassons that they were, working on or whatever. And then it all
Right?
got shut down. I think it was in 75 too, right?
Yeah, and they dropped him off at embassies and stuff.
Yeah, like it's crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Let's see, here's a reading from this. Just as he had suddenly become involved again in August 1980 with the Catcher in the Rye, he equally and suddenly, mysteriously thereafter recovered interest in Lennon, whom, as with Holden Caulfield, he had not thought about for nearly the past 10 years. So his interest in this book supposedly just materialized, according to this author, about Chapman.
Mhm.
If Catcher was the trigger of Mark's programmed mind alerting him to the danger of the world's phonies, then this unnamed other book, perhaps suggested to him by his controller, pointed him in the right direction. It was Anthony Fawcett's John Lennon, One Day at a Time. Let's see. He completed the job started by the Catcher in the Rye. And then he kind of mentions this whole sequence in here about here's another one, holding Caulfield melting down when somebody wrote the F word at Phoebe's school. It
Mhm.
drove me damn near crazy. I thought how Phoebe and all the other little kids would see it and how they'd wonder what the hell it meant. And then finally some dirty kid would tell them. I kept wanting to kill whoever had written it. I figured it was some perverty bum that sneaked into school late at night and then wrote it on the wall. I kept picturing myself catching him at it and how it smashed his head on the stone steps till he was good and goddamn dead and bloody. But I knew, too, I wouldn't have the guts to do it. That made me even more depressed.
What if Holden actually had been the one to write it, and because he's disassociative, maybe he's schizophrenic too, that he's one personality is judgmental on the other personality, and it's him all along.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. In fact, that phrase, the FU phrase, is written a couple different places. It's written in the museum, and it's written in another place. Was it the stairwell on the wall? But I think it shows up like three different times.
Wait. It appears in a stairwell. It appears, you said, in a library,
No, museum,
a museum, a stairwell, and what's the third place?
school.
School.
The school is the
Wow.
first place he sees it. Then the second place he sees it's in the museum. I think the third place, I don't really remember, but I think it's a stairwell, like on the walls.
I wonder what the symbolism of those, it appearing in those three places, could be. I wonder if there's, you look at the stairwell and you think, well, is there anything Masonic there? You look at the
Well,
museum.
interesting. It's maybe even anti-Masonic because he was he's failing out of all of his classes and he's supposed to do like a paper or a little essay on Egypt,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Yeah, and he just like basically, I don't know anything about Egypt. I'll understand if you flunk me, kind of thing, like not even try. But later on in the story, when he's waiting for Phoebe, he shows these two other little kids the part in the museum where the mummies are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that maybe there might be something at least connected to Egypt, you know.
Right. Wow, crazy. Like Chapman is the catcher in the rye. So he takes on this persona of Holden Caulfield. That's why he did it. So it must be some kind of internal trigger. And just like you said, he bought the catcher in the rye. According to this book, this is the day John Lennon died. Chapman, as he walked the 20 blocks up to the Dakota on West 72nd Street, incongruous amid the lightly dressed New Yorkers with his heavy winter gear, he realized he was missing a prop. He had with him his double fantasy album, but something was missing. He halted his progress toward Lennon's selected place of execution and dived into a bookshop to emerge with a red paperback copy of The Catcher in the Rye. On the title page, he wrote, "To Holden Caulfield from Holden Caulfield." And below that, "This is my statement." Then he went to the Dakota, and in between times, he opened his book and read from The Catcher in the Rye.
Right.
Like a good little boy.
Which brings me to the interesting thing that I heard on America's Untold Stories is that the actual doorman at the Dakota was Frank Sturgis's handlers. Frank Sturgis is known CIA contractor involved with Watergate, Operation Mongoose, and this, that, and the other. It makes me wonder, William, at these sort of MK Ultra assassins, would you have someone like a CIA op just there to make sure, who's watching to make sure things go smoothly?
I would say if you're in on it, yeah. So they were
Right.
probably plotting to kill Lennon for months because I think Chapman had taken multiple trips to New York City.
Right.
So he was always kind of going to be the patsy.
Right.
I don't think he shot Lennon.
Right. Well, here's what I was going to say. Like, hypothetically, if things went wrong, do you think Janice would have shot, or Janice or whatever, would have shot Chapman to make himself look like the hero to save the operation?
Maybe that's the point. That probably, like, I think that was what was supposed to happen to Oswald. So
Yeah.
Oswald was probably supposed to either be shot by Tippett or somebody, so
Right.
that they could just. I mean, I think they tried to kill him in that Texas movie theater. The gun went off, like somebody
Yeah.
got shot. Like, so I think so the guns were like that was probably supposed to be a perfect spot to end it, right?
Right.
No,
Well,
I
you
know
know, funny enough, I think Oswald, to an extent, was a victim of MK Ultra, because I think that when he's at that house that he's renting a room from and he hears the horn, that I think that horn, just like Catcher in the Rye, was a trigger telling him, okay, get up and go. Time to go to the movie theater.
there's a lot of weird similarities and weird bases and weird things like that these
Mhm.
guys were at, and there were a lot of these operations are cleverly within hospitals and stuff like that. That's the whole thing. So the external kind of people would be like, oh, it's just your standard hospital, you know.
Right.
They have a wing for emergency, but they
Right.
got another wing you don't ever want to end up in for a long period of time.
Right. Now, the interesting thing about the Holden Caulfield and using Holden Caulfield as an MK Ultra trigger is obviously, like we said, he identifies with Holden Caulfield, but it's the romanticism, right, of being the rebel. You know?
Yeah, I think you're right. But like, look at like the people that are going to identify with Holden, troubled people.
Troubled
So
people,
if you're
exactly.
if you're writing a book to have a trigger, you're not going to write like a well-adjusted, athletic guy with a girlfriend and a promising future. It's going to be like Holden Caulfield, right? So you're looking for somebody.
Exactly. What I'm getting at though is like you have to sell the idea. Initially, if you're doing an MK Ultra op, you have to sell the idea to your victim with someone they identify with, right? And that's Holden Caulfield. If in this case, Mark David Chapman, you know,
right? He's the stand-in. I mean, it's weird too, because you can see, like I just read this book, and that kind of personality of Holden Caulfield it's not like you're reading the Lord of the Rings where you have these objective heroes. You're listening to this guy's internal monologue for friggin' 270 pages, and it's not pretty. So it's not like a positive influence. You're done. You're like, yeah, get this thing out of here. But imagine like somebody who's been, MK'd or whatever. Like, wow, the power.
I had to take breaks.
Yeah,
I had to turn it off after a bit.
Well, also look at Chapman he okay, who's the one that okay, no, the guy who shot Reagan is the one that did it for Jodie Foster, right?
Right,
And
right.
he also had Catcher in the Rye on him, right? Or
Right.
No, but there is an MK Ultra connection
to
because
him, yeah. Well,
because he liked Taxi Driver,
yeah,
right?
No,
exactly.
no. You're getting mixed. I think you're getting mixed up. It was Arthur Brunner who liked Taxi Driver, right?
No,
No, the guy who shot Reagan.
no. The guy who shot Reagan was obsessed with Jodie Foster. But
Right.
the basis of Taxi Driver, the guy who's the head is what's his name? It's
De Niro, Travis Bickle.
Travis Bickle is
Yeah.
based
Okay.
on Broomer.
And
bad.
and
It's based
he's
on Broomer.
protecting, he's trying to protect Jodie Foster's
The
character,
same
which is
theme, guys. It's the same theme as Catcher in the Rye.
exactly the
Boom.
protector
I
of
kinda,
children.
but didn't they find Catcher in the Rye amongst other books in his belongings?
That's
was
what
his
I thought,
name?
but maybe not.
It's not Chapman. What's his last name? He's like
Hinkley.
Right?
Hinkley. Yeah, Hinkley.
Hinkley,
I
yeah.
have to go back and look.
Friends with the Bush family.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in fact,
family
I
friends.
believe that Hinkley's in the had dinner with Neil Bush the week before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oilman. His dad's an oilman. But let's write what after Chapman got arrested, he wrote this and said, this is what he wrote. It is my sincere belief that presenting this written statement will not only stimulate the reading of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, but will also help many to understand what has happened. If you were able to view the actual copy of The Catcher in the Rye that was taken from me on the night of December 8th, you would find it in the handwritten words, "This is my statement." Unfortunately, I was unable to continue this stance and have since spoken openly with the police, doctors, and others involved in this case. I now fully realize that this should not have been done, for it removed the emphasis that I wanted to place on the book. My wish is for all of you to someday read The Catcher in the Rye. All of my efforts will now be devoted towards this goal, for this extraordinary book holds many answers. My true hope is that in wanting to find these answers, you will read The Catcher in the Rye. Thank you, Mark David Chapman, The Catcher in the Rye. This gets so intense because if this is the book to trigger, this is the use of a patsy, a mind control patsy, to further propagate the impact of this book with all this crazy stuff in it to get it even farther out into the public.
Yeah.
So they almost doubled down to this guy's in the care of heavy duty doctors, Klein, who basically there's a video of Klein saying, yes, I can create a mind control slave in 6 weeks or whatever. Literally went into when he says he's in care of doctors, that's the doctor he's involved in. It's a common theme with so many events in the United States. These guys are under the care of doctors, so they're probably getting readjusted kind of hypnotism sessions or something like that, even while they're in custody.
Yeah.
So crazy. So
well, I was told in the late 90s that what they did to my dad in the late 50s when he was in the Air Force was keyed to the phases of the moon, so that what was laid in the narrative that was laid in his psyche and his memory would be reactivated automatically, so they would not have to meet with him even after he got out of the military. Just seeing the cycles of the moon would just reactivate that. And
that's so interesting.
An automatic refresher. And if they perfected that, because that's what they were after in MK Ultra, they were looking for that self-perpetuating key or trigger, so that all they'd have to do is lay it in there once. And from my research, it was to the phase the Air Force broke this, and it was to the phases of the moon. So they wouldn't have to necessarily meet with any of these individuals. They could have keyed it to something like that, so that it would just continue on automatic.
Walter, we're going to have a longer conversation about that.
We should.
I didn't know that, because that connects with some of the research that I've been doing. Yeah.
So just to kind of continue, because when did Lennon get shot? What was the date? It was 1980.
It was December of 80.
December 1980. It wasn't 81.
No. It wasn't 81.
1980.
December 80.
but
So
like go ahead.
just to let you know, like just to emphasize the importance and the effect of this book on Chapman, when he gets up in court in August of 81, right, about 8 months later, 9 months later, he brings in a copy of A Catcher in the Rye. He has it with him. He takes it out. He opens his copy of The Catcher in the Rye, reads an extract to the hush, parts 49. He's talking about this is about the same impact of this trying to save this young girl, right? He's talking to his sister Phoebe, and he says, anyway, this is the sequence. Anyway, I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big game, that theme of game that I mentioned from the beginning, right? This gamification. So it's kind of a detachment from like real life, because we're just playing a game, right? It's not actual real life. Anyway, I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye, and all thousands of little kids, and nobody is around, nobody big, I mean, except me. And I'm standing on the edge of some craggy cliff. What I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, they are running and they don't look where they're going. I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. That's all I do all day. I'd just be the catcher in the rye.
Right. And, you know, that's interesting. Like I said, that's the basic male power fantasy is the fantasy men have. It's like where they're the hero.
Yeah, the rescuer.
Right? They're the rescuer. They save the day. But it's like I said before, like it kind of makes you wonder if he's just trying to save himself. And like what Walter said, he's just compensating. Yeah. It's really interesting that Mark David Chapman identifies so much with this part. Like the question is, who's he trying to save? Or who was he programmed to try and save? Right?
Yeah.
So yes, Hinkley did have a copy of Catcher in the Rye. It's confirmed here. Rawhide down. Rendezvous from Destiny. A 4-day trip was a blur of fast food and brief stops: Las Vegas, Cheyenne, Chicago, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Through Utah, he spent much of the trip slouched in a window seat, watching the scenery stream by or reading The Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger's novel of teenage angst and alienation. It's way more than that. He identified with the main character, Holden Caulfield, and then it goes on. Left Monday, 129 left. Well, Best Western, a suitcase of some poems and short stories, several of his favorite books. In addition to The Catcher in the Rye, Hinkley also brought along a copy of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, mentioned in Catcher in the Rye, strangely enough.
Right.
In a book of Strawberry Fields Forever, John Lennon remembered.
The interesting thing about Hinkley now is he makes like freaking emo music, which is usually associated with sort of a younger crowd, you know? That teenage crowd. There's not a lot of older people who listen to emo music. So that may be something or maybe nothing. Like, so I guess with Mark David Chapman, William, I guess when he ran into James Taylor earlier in the evening before he killed Lennon, I guess he would, in your opinion, I guess he would perceive Lennon as a phony. James Taylor as a phony.
Say that again. I was reading some. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, like, the way Holden Caulfield perceives people as phony, right?
Yeah, right.
Mark David Chapman runs into James Taylor earlier in the evening, and he basically, according to Taylor, Mark David Chapman looks kind of strung out, and, Taylor may have said something to trigger Chapman. And, well, it's, so I'm guessing if Mark David Chapman's sort of thinking like Holden Caulfield, if he's programmed to do it like that, then maybe he'd perceive James Taylor as a phony. Like Holden Caulfield perceives so many people and things as phony in the book Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't be surprised. He probably took on Holden Caulfield's persona.
Yeah.
Everything's corrupt. Everybody's a phony. Blah, blah, blah. So when he sees these famous people, it's just another phony. Mm-hmm. Lennon's a phony. They're all phonies.
Yeah.
Here's some more synchronicity fun. If you go back to that picture of Chapman, if you gave him a haircut and put a beard on him, he might resemble J.D. Vance. So think of J.D. Salinger, J.D. Vance. It's an observation. It's not a judgment or an indictment. It's just an observation.
Well, here's an interesting synchronicity with me kind of in the peripherals of my life is that James Taylor actually taught a songwriting class at Berkeley. My buddy or an old associate of mine went to Berkeley and took that songwriting class from James Taylor.
Oh,
Wow, wow.
Yeah, and his name was Keenan Payne, and his mother was an actress named Karen Payne.
uh-huh.
If you've ever seen the movie The Octagon with Chuck Norris,
Yeah.
yeah, she was the love interest who got murdered by ninjas via throwing star.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
in that movie, it's speculated by me personally that Chuck Norris had some psychological illness or something because when his intuition had echo,
Interesting.
like you could hear his thoughts in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I digress. Let's get back on topic. I just putting
It
that out
is
there because I thought it would be interesting.
it is interesting. I saw Octagon a long time ago, back in my younger days. This isn't like when you know this knowledge of the book. This is Joe Atwill, who was in that was it The Shining, was it
Mhm.
Clockwork Shining documentary. He wrote The Freemason in the Rye, which I should reread, 2015. But this cover makes it even kind of more disturbing when you know the content of the book. That's his
Mhm.
human hunting hat. He's wearing this red hat he puts on with the things around his ear. And this is a schizophrenic thing where he saw the birds in freaking Central Park.
Well,
So it's like this is disturbing, man. It's not.
right.
What kind of
Well,
birds
and
were they?
I have it in my notes.
Blackbirds, crows?
I have it in my notes.
also, it's interesting why you find those notes. The human hunting hat. It's almost like the Zodiac killer talking about the most dangerous game.
Yeah.
Hunting humans is
Right.
the best prey of all, right?
Well,
Right.
and I'm sure the lefties are making a lot of hay out of the red hat and the MAGA red hat and all that stuff. I'm sure the lefties just have a field day with that symbolism.
It was
Yeah.
about ducks. It was about ducks.
Ducks. Okay. Okay.
Where did the ducks go? Like he couldn't figure out where the ducks went. Like ducks, he didn't understand that they like
Oh, I like how
fly
they
north and
migrated.
south. Yeah. I wonder where the ducks go when the lagoon got all icy and frozen over. I wondered if some guy came in a truck and took them away to the zoo or something, or if they just flew away. So it's like he didn't he his attachment to reality isn't like hadn't learned that ducks migrate or birds go somewhere.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, we
why would
all
you
learned
ask that
that in
question?
kindergarten. Birds
You see
migrate.
them fly over.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Isn't there another bird reference when he's in the museum?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty disturbing when you see this many people that book is connected to. The Schaeffer Bardo, Chapman, Hinkley. I mean, it's all I mean, it's right here in The Shining. So The Shining is like a almost like a dissociative state. The kid's obviously been like tortured or whatever. In the book, it's like there is kind of a light pedo kind of element to definitely to The Shining and definitely to The Catcher in the Rye or some kind
Right.
of like abuse.
The-
Like I
the-
said,
the-
he
Go
wakes
ahead.
up at does he wakes up with his if I remember early in the book, he wakes up and his headmaster is stroking his head. He's
Yeah.
16. Like
Oh,
that's
there you
weird.
go.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like
That's creeper stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on his
Think about it.
couch.
It's 1951 when this book is published. You know, you had to be a little bit more euphemistic or low
Yeah.
key about what you were
Yeah.
suggesting in that regard back then.
Yeah. The thing is with like abuse, if Holden was abused, it's a cycle, right? The abuser most of the time ends up, abusing somebody else, and then so forth and so forth and so forth and so forth. The question is, who abused Holden? Was it the father? Was it the mother? You know,
Possibly. I don't know.
yeah.
Hmm.
So there's a whole nother story. There's even more depth. You know,
So what conclusions do we all draw from the influence of this book on our
I really don't think anything good came from it. There's a reason why it was the most challenged book from 1961 to 1982. You know, Teachers didn't really want it in their classroom. Parents didn't want their kids reading it, right? And because it's high school for the most part, you have kids with Lucifer brain, who that have the natural need to rebel. Thus, them reading the books and identifying maybe with Holden Caulfield because of their age,
Yeah.
or this, that, and the other. Um, I
And
just
I
don't
think
see
that's its
anything
target
good coming
audience.
from it. Yeah.
I think, I mean, like when I put my paranoid hat on, it gets really dark, just like you kind of mentioned, Walter. Where'd it come from? Why is it so sophisticated? Why does this young guy know all this stuff? And why is it attached to all these deaths? Like it's almost like it was planted in the culture, like another culture creation. How many of these movies have come out that have been supplied? I just found out that Red Dawn, which is the movie about communists attacking the United States, right?
Yep. Yep.
It was promoted while Al Haig, who was a member of the Knights of Malta, huge crusader against communism, when he was on the board of MGM. So the green light for that has a different kind of. It's not like something just popped up in the culture organically, like so many other things that aren't organic. Like that's what I've learned. Beatles weren't organic. So
MGM just keeps popping up.
yeah, just the connections you start understanding, like, oh, like I know that Pearl Harbor. I didn't know Pearl Harbor at the time. That film that came out after 9/11 was like CIA funded, and it's the timing was perfect. But that was also culture creation.
Well, the interesting thing about MGM is David Carr worked for MGM, and he was sort of the fixer for Onassis, Aristotle Onassis.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It just dawned on me another little synchronicity. Wasn't that so? Sam Carr, was that the father, or was that in the Carr family and the son?
Oh, although David and Michael, John, and Sam are from the same place.
Yeah.
That Michael, John, and Sam are Carr, and David changed his name to Karr.
Okay, but there was a Sam Carr that was in that mix, right?
Right, there
yeah,
is.
okay,
Yeah.
now did they not have a sister named Wheat?
Yes.
Now, isn't the character in Ghost Sam Wheat, or am I getting my names mixed up? And so, I wonder if there's anything to be gleaned from. I don't know. See, in my mind, when we start talking about these things and pulling these threads, guys, I go down multiple rabbit holes. Because
I'm the same
I
way,
think
Walter. Don't feel bad.
Patrick Swayze's character is named Sam Wheat, and remember, he gets murdered, and he's trying to communicate from the other side. Think of Sidney Gottlieb in the CIA, and he was the occult guy, and I don't know, just for what it's worth.
No, that's interesting. I think that's gonna be part of our longer conversation later on about the phases.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do that. We're gonna have to, if we got more threads to pull here, we're gonna have to do this again. I think have a part two, because we're almost to the end of our time here.
Yeah. Hey, William. Before I forget, I kind of wanted to do a show on Stepford Wives, another sort of book club type of thing, like we're doing now.
Anytime.
Okay, awesome.
Wasn't that 11 book? Wasn't it based on Ira Levin?
I think so.
Stepford Wives was Ira Levin.
Yeah, he's written some good books. He's
Well,
underappreciated.
There's some more synchronicity. Ira Levin, also the author of Rosemary's Baby, which takes place in the Dakota, or at least Polanski filmed it in the Dakota. And that's where John Lennon was murdered. But that's also where Jack Finney said his time travel novel was in the Dakota.
Doesn't Crowley have a connection to the Dakota as well?
I don't know.
I don't know, maybe.
It opened in 1882.
I wouldn't be surprised. I know he lived, when he was in New York City, he lived at 1 Washington Place, which isn't by Central Park. That's Lower Manhattan. It's actually off of Washington Square.
Okay.
So I know that. But he was in New York City for 3 or 4 years. So
yeah,
to be there, I wouldn't be surprised. He was kind of like, hanging out with the literati types.
Yeah, that's where the murkiness about whether Lovecraft met Crowley comes in, because Lovecraft, the one marriage he had, she ran in circles. The wife ran in circles that Crowley was in, but they'd never been able to confirm whether Lovecraft met Crowley. And of course, there's all that Cthulhu stuff that, and on and so forth that Peter
Yeah.
Lavender
Hey,
talks about.
you know what we'll do too, and because we were talking about Son of Sam briefly, we
Mhm.
need to have Dana and her friend Parker on
Let's do
because
it.
they are experts at the Son of Sam stuff.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's all do it. So, well, hey, is there any closing remarks you guys would like to leave everyone with?
Well, they can go see my other stuff at William Ramsey Investigates the Podcast. I got 5 books. I'm very busy, and 5 documentaries on my Patreon. So check it out.
Yep.
Excellent, folks. Go check that out.
Yep. And William, thank you so much for having
Thank
this
you.
conversation with us.
Yes.
Great, like I've said before, great research from a great researcher. I found this conversation to be stimulating, and just I love having conversations like this.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you guys. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you
coming
so
back.
much.
That's it for our Killifornia episode this time, and this definitely is a rabbit hole we got to go farther down because I think we're just
We've only scratched the surface.
so anyway, that's it this time, and thanks again, William and Todd, of course, and we'll see you guys next time.